Test, test. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome, awesome. I think audio is good. Hello and welcome to the Process Over Profit podcast. My name is Jack Fleming, a entrepreneurship and business podcast. I like to cover everything because I sort of feel like I do everything. Again, this podcast is brought to you by Entra, a new professional network built for entrepreneurs, investors, creators, and freelancers. You can easily create content, grow your network, and meet new like-minded people in live rooms and events on the app. All listeners can sign up for free and also get upgraded to Entre Pro, which gives you access to over $50,000 in deals and discounts with over 100 partners. Once you sign up on joinentre.com, make sure to go to entre.link/Jack to get upgraded to Entre Pro, and make sure to connect with me on there at Jack Does Marketing. For the podcast today, I'm super excited because we get to talk to one of the possibly most influential people in the entrepreneurship ecosystem in Wilmington. No, it's not, business owner of a bigger company that you probably have heard of in Wilmington so far, but he's definitely super behind the scenes and super influential to, honestly, all of us here in Wilmington, whether it comes to building great community or bringing VCs from around the state into Wilmington to grow us on the national scale. We'd like to introduce Jim Roberts to the podcast.
Hello, and thank you for having me today.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I'm going to keep this nice and to the point. And I know you like pretty specific questions, but why don't you give us a quick just rundown of a little bit of your background and why you sort of wanted to get into building ecosystems for cities.
Sure. So as you can see, I'm a University of Florida graduate, very proud and obnoxious about that. After moving from Gainesville, Florida up to Atlanta, I worked for a very strange little business called the Internet Store. It was the first retail environment for the internet. And Jack, I know you're going to find this hard to believe, but in 1993, when you bought a computer, there wasn't even a modem in it. And they were trying to grow the internet. So you had to buy things like modems and connect them to your computers. And that's what this store did. And so it was a retail store for internet related products, even the discs that you had to buy to get onto the internet. And I started teaching kind of an Internet 101 class on how to use the internet. And both of my parents are public teachers, and I kind of got into that and liked it. And moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, where I was going to have my own business just doing that, just teaching people how to use the internet. I saw that Charlotte was the banking capital of the South, and certainly a growing city, and had a new NFL team. And so I was looking for a new place to go and moved to Charlotte. And in a few years, I was a website salesman and noticed that all of my prospects for websites were all these .com entrepreneurs, but none of them had any money to be able to sign the contract with the website sales that I was trying to do. So in a way to help myself, I said, what can I do to help these entrepreneurs get more money? And if I connect them to money, surely they would sign the website design with me because I just helped them get the money. Mm-hmm. And that's how I came into ecosystem building, because those events that I began to hold for entrepreneurs were full of investors, were full of mentors, full of lawyers and accountants, and the media loved it. Like the local newspaper, the Business Journal of Charlotte, just couldn't get enough of these events. And sure enough, that took off. It took off more. No one gave a damn about the websites. They just wanted to know, how can I be a part of this ecosystem? Because it was a really missing part of what was going on in Charlotte. Actually, the only big .com at the time in Charlotte was Doug Lebda of Lending Tree, which became a national brand and did really well and went public. But he really struggled in Charlotte because the banks really fought him because they thought he was taking away their
Mm-hmm.
their loan business for houses.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, After the dot-com crash and after 9/11, all of that went away. And no one wanted to invest in startups. No one wanted anything to do with startups. And I got a call 3 days after I had chosen to close the business, but I hadn't told anyone. I got a call from Asheville, North Carolina saying, "We love what you're doing in Charlotte, but we know you're not making any money. How would you like to move to Charlotte and we'll give you a full-time job and benefits?" And that sounded pretty good to me. So in 2002, I relocated to Asheville and did the same thing. I started an entrepreneur support organization and an angel network, and I kind of took over an angel network that had been built by an entrepreneur, but the entrepreneur wanted to focus on his business. So he let me take over the angel network, and I was in Asheville for 4 years and eventually moved to Raleigh and started working for the North Carolina Department of Commerce. I moved there for a little while and started with a new organization called COIN, which is the Center of Innovation for Nanobio, which is a program of the Biotech Center. And then I got recruited to UNC Wilmington to open what was called the CIE,
Mm-hmm.
the Center of Innovation and Entrepreneurship. And I was the first executive director. And we took over a really ugly old commercial real estate building that also had a real estate school inside of a real estate building. And
Mm-hmm.
so that became the classroom where we had all of our events. That obviously that building still stands today. And in 2015, I started what I'm doing now, the Network for Entrepreneurs in Wilmington, which is an independent nonprofit entrepreneur support organization, and the Wilmington Angels for Local Entrepreneurs, which is an angel network.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, awesome. So you definitely been around. Asheville is my hometown, and so I
Well,
can.
I'm 50 years old, so yeah, I've been around.
You have that great experience that will honestly benefit our listeners and viewers. Um, but I mean, other than the part of you got recruited by UNCW and the Center of Innovation and Entrepreneurship to come to Wilmington, were there any other, I mean, aspects of Wilmington that was it the potential of growth that also intrigued you to come? Or were there any other factors that led to that decision to come to Wilmington?
Well, first and foremost, I wanted the challenge. People said Charlotte was not an entrepreneur city.
Hmm.
And, I don't know how much you know about Charlotte, but they say that the first conversation you have with everybody, the question is, what church do you go to and what bank do you work for? And neither one of those really relates to entrepreneurship at all. It's a very
Yeah.
pro-business city, but it is a mature industry city. They
That
tend to
sounds like a very Southern culture kind of city.
right, but they tend to recruit the companies to Charlotte, not necessarily very supportive of entrepreneurship. Now that's changed since, that was 18 years ago when I was in Charlotte. So, um, you know, everyone wants to live at the beach, right? I mean, that's no secret either. Is I had more visitors in my first 2 weeks of living in Wilmington than I had in 7 years of living in Raleigh or 6 years living in Charlotte. Everyone wants to come and see you when you live at the beach, but um, there was a big opportunity, and I don't know. I like the grit and the challenge of overcoming what other people say that can't be done.
Mm, mm.
And we've certainly achieved that in Wilmington.
Yeah, I feel like that's definitely a pretty common trait with entrepreneurs. It's like they want to build the business, hence the name process over profit. I sort of like the ability to build a company and the grit behind it and the hustle behind it, versus maybe the outcomes of profit. I mean, profit is great, cash is great for business, but also I think we're addicted to building something from scratch and the nitty gritty. But what are some of the things that make, I guess, Wilmington a bad place for entrepreneurship versus bigger cities like a Raleigh, Charlotte, or even possibly like Atlanta?
What makes it a bad place for entrepreneurs?
Yes. So like, why? I mean, I guess it's definitely smaller than those big cities, but in comparison, why would an entrepreneur be more inclined to go to those bigger cities versus Wilmington?
Well, one is reputation.
Mm-hmm.
I have a theory that most people disagree with, but I don't believe you can recruit entrepreneurs to your city. I think you can attract them only through the success of the entrepreneurs that are already there.
Mm.
I'll give you an
Okay.
example. Well, again, you're too young to understand this, but Austin, Texas was not a technology hotbed before Dell Computers really made a name for Austin. And I would challenge your audience to name a single another company that started in Austin outside of Whole Foods, which is not really the tech economy. But
Mm-hmm.
Dell Computer made the name that made Austin sexy. Okay. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's the success that we're having now that makes Wilmington a much better place than it was 8 years ago. So the success of Encino obviously is a spin out of Live Oak, which has its own great story. Untapped or Next Glass, depending on how you call it. There was even a third exit last year that less people talk about called Player Space, and they
Mm-hmm.
sold to a big company out of Houston, Texas. That's what changes the reputation of a city as being an entrepreneurial friendly city.
Mm-hmm. And shows like Startup coming here definitely help, correct?
Well, that is going to be, I hope that it's really going to be a life changing opportunity for the city of Wilmington to really get on the radar. I don't know if you've heard me talk recently, but I was on a Zoom recently with the leader of Techstars Atlanta, and he let us join a Zoom that he was having for some other cities.
Mm.
And I said, thank you so much, Dave, for letting us, letting 5 entrepreneurs from Wilmington join this event today. And he said, thank you so much for joining us from Delaware.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
if I could have grabbed that guy through the phone, grabbed his throat, I would have killed him. But it just shows you the branding challenge that we have as Wilmington is we're so far in the shadows of bigger cities like Charlotte and Raleigh in our own state that it's really hard for us to make a name for ourselves. So when this TV show has to say, hey, we're in Wilmington, North Carolina with 5 episodes running in about a month and a half, over 6 weeks. Well, I guess it's a little bit longer than that. 5 out of the 13 episodes this season are in Wilmington,
Mm-hmm.
and the other cities are Charleston and Savannah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this is a big, huge opportunity, and I really wish Wilmington would get behind it and share it with their friends nationwide.
Mm-hmm. How do you think? And obviously, you're doing a lot to impact that. How do you think we can do that from the side of maybe the chamber or city council or?
No, it has nothing to do with either one of those organizations. It's you, it's
Mhm.
your friend, it's the 115 people that came to our last event. And when the show gets posted, you simply send it out and say, hey, this is my new hometown. Look what we did. And maybe they'll want to come and visit and build their company here.
Mhm.
That's what it's all about. It has nothing to do with the chamber, has nothing to do with city council. Entrepreneurs don't like bureaucracies. They want to
Mhm.
hear from other entrepreneurs, and that's what we're counting on to make an impact.
Mhm. Being somebody who graduated from UNCW and studied marketing strategy and entrepreneurship in school, what are your thoughts on young entrepreneurs coming into this area? Obviously, there have been a few that I see at events a lot because I'm one of them. But what do you think is good about the developing process and opportunities we have for them in the area being around, let's say, a George Taylor or a Live Oak Bank? Do you
Well, I
think we
think
have?
you're seeing that more than ever before. If you
Mhm.
look, there's a gentleman by the name of Mark Mazzoni with a company called Verily, and he's a UNCW graduate who joined the Army, moved up to Maryland, and is now moving his company back to Wilmington because he read about things like Genesis Block
Mhm.
that were very helpful for minority entrepreneurs. A company like Patrick Brown with his company Rainlist. He's also a UNCW graduate. Or if you look at Smart Fox and Philip Everhart, who just won a Coastal Entrepreneur Award, these are all UNCW graduates who, uh, you know, had a different business or had a different job coming out of college and decided to start their own companies in Wilmington, and that's the best sign that we can imagine. Not only that, but companies like Live Oak Bank and Encino have now hired, for the first time in the history of Wilmington, they've hired over 500 UNCW graduates. That those 500 people probably typically moved away,
Mm-hmm.
over the history since UNCW was built,
Mm-hmm.
have always moved away to Boston or Raleigh or Charlotte or New York or Silicon Valley to find their real career.
Yeah, and I've even seen people leaving those bigger companies in town to like the Live Oak Burns, and starting their own companies. I know
Yeah.
the guy with Badger Box did that, and I know there's definitely a few others. People hang out with their coworkers, and they're like, "Hey, let's create a business," and they're making businesses based off of what they've learned through working at those bigger companies that have flourished here.
Well, that is the outcome of the ecosystem. That is
Mm-hmm.
exactly what we're aiming to do. Is if you can spend a few years learning from a George Taylor or a Live Oak Bank or an Encino, um, learn how to manage people, learn how to grow a business, the sales and all that, and the management, and how to manage people, and then start your own thing. That is the whole goal of every ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How is building an ecosystem in a city um, compared to building a business? What are the similar traits in you? I feel like marketing is definitely huge because that's what I do, and I'm trying to help businesses be seen, boost sales, and that's what you're trying to do as well with building Wilmington. You're helping them be seen,
Yeah.
uh, help more entrepreneurs come to the area or come back to the area. Would you compare it to marketing, or how would you compare building a city's ecosystem to a typical company?
Well, oddly enough, it takes about the same time to build an ecosystem as it does to start and exit a company.
Mm-hmm.
If you look where the many people around town, not just myself, think that the ecosystem in Wilmington started in 2013 when the CIE started. And so the companies that were started just around the same time as Encino and NextGlass, Untapped, those companies took, 5 to 7 years to achieve an exit. So
Mm-hmm.
the ecosystem has taken an equally long time. And, most people don't understand why that is. I would say I just gave a speech yesterday on the 5 parts of an ecosystem, and that's events, preparing entrepreneurs to meet investors, media coverage, communications. Um, there's a couple others in there, but advocacy is one of those. And I think if I'm being honest, that's probably the best thing that I've done for Wilmington is introduce what I call the coastal corridor. Is
Mm-hmm.
how can I spend political capital as the leader up and down I-40 between Wilmington and Raleigh. And I'll give you an example. We took 17 people from Wilmington and they carpooled together to go to a Bull City Venture Capital breakfast event.
Mm.
And so Bull City Capital is run by a guy named David Jones. He's the co-founder, who's a native of Wilmington. And I let him know that we were coming. And guess what? He reserved the second row of the event all for Wilmington. And we had the highest presence of any city outside of Raleigh, Durham, because we had 17 people.
Mm-hmm.
And it looked like there was a crowd of people from Wilmington. And that makes an impression. They're like, wow, I'd never thought of Wilmington as an ecosystem or as a startup hub.
Mm-hmm.
And we make those kind of impressions all the time. And you see my social media. I am very active on social media, and I'm trying to let people know what's going on because again, we don't have a lot of media reach in Wilmington. Our stories don't make it into Charlotte and Raleigh and beyond, but I'm sure trying to make that happen.
Yeah, and I think you're doing a great job too. Just to give
We have
some
we
credit
have the
to you,
number
yeah,
one article this year in Atlanta is
yeah.
about Wilmington. There's a website called Hippopotamus, and they wrote a whole newsletter on Wilmington, and we have the most read article of 2021
That's crazy.
in Atlanta, and that makes no sense to anyone, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. What other companies do you think would flourish in Wilmington, knowing the climate and ecosystem very well. Obviously, beer has done very well, and fintech slash just financial in general has done very well. What other business industries do you think would do well in Wilmington?
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna see. Well, if you read the Wilmington Business Magazine, there's an article this week on artificial intelligence. Now, the challenge that we have there is we have to boost up the talent that we have in Wilmington. We have to find more employees. If you saw last week, there's a company called Vantica that announced 100 new jobs at $80,000, and you can live pretty good in $80,000 salary in Wilmington. Very soon, within the next 7 days, you'll see a press announcement of 85 more jobs that pay an even higher salary. And that's something that I've been actively involved with to bring this expansion to Wilmington. So who's going to take those jobs, and where can we find that talent? I think something you're going to see soon is Raleigh and Durham are a little overcrowded, a little overheated right now. You've got 20,000 open technology jobs, and Apple and Google coming to Raleigh Durham. And so how does a startup compete with the salary levels of Google and Apple? They don't. So where can you put an office where your employees want to live, that maybe they'll be a little more loyal and still have a six-figure salary, but live in a place where they want to live? Do people really want to live on I-40 in Raleigh, Durham? No. That's just where the jobs are, right? Mm-hmm. So if we can continue this momentum that we have in the last 7 days, of these 5 huge things that have happened in the last 7 days, then we have the real momentum to become, potentially we already are the third best ecosystem, but I think these things in the last 7 days are really going to cement that brand that we are definitely the third best ecosystem in the state.
That's awesome. I'm excited. I definitely have. I made my parents watch the startup show of True Colors recently. Yep. So we're getting some views there. That's good.
What did they think? What did your parents think?
They haven't.
They recorded it.
Yeah. So I sent them a link to the PBS one.
Okay.
I tried to get them to watch it live, like I did, but they had my mom. I have a very interesting habit of calling my mom right before she has to talk with a client.
Right.
Like it's like every single time it's like, Jack, I gotta go.
Right.
This client's calling me every time. And my dad's been super busy lately too. He does business law, so it's luckily that I have him in my corner to do all of my stuff. I've actually had to call him a lot recently to do some contracts for people. But what have been some really cool businesses you've seen lately in Wilmington and beyond too? Is there anything that like really stands out to you from an angel side and also from the entrepreneurial ecosystem side? So let's do 2 separate things: a business that you see that would help the area grow from a community side, and then business that you see that's good, that you see the growth there's in general and that you'll see return from.
Yeah, I mean, I think you were at the event that we had recently. We actually, and I'd never done this in 20 years of doing this work, where we announced that 3 new companies had moved to Wilmington from other cities, and we put them on stage. So a company called Fetch, where it's F3TCH. What they're doing is they're moved from Colorado Springs, Colorado, and it basically allows your mobile phone, your cell phone, to become really the controller of everything in your hotel room. Mm-hmm. So as people get a little germophobic, of course, now in a pandemic, they don't want to touch things in a hotel room, but you trust your own phone. And so this was a very interesting way, since we're such a tourism economy and a tourism region. That's a company that, if they, again, have to get the scale and sell outside of the region, that could have some potential. The
I
two
think I remember
companies that,
hearing it was a CRM as well, right? It lets
correct.
the hotel like easily
Yeah.
communicate events and
Yes.
all text messaging to the family. That's
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah. So the company that we're interested in, and in full disclosure, Whale recently made an investment in opioid. For those people who are watching your show that don't know, that Wilmington is actually the number one city in America for opioid abuse, where 11.6% of people in Wilmington have some kind of addiction to an opioid. And so this is a company that has a wearable device that measures your biometrics of your body to while you're going through a rehab clinic, because 2 out of 3 people leave rehab before they're done with their rehab.
Mm.
And so the client for this company are rehab clinics as a way that they can be more profitable, but it also, at the end of the day, of course, helps the addict become clean and hopefully lead a more functional lifestyle. So obviously, we're big fans of opioid, and Daniel Summers' company called eLab Logs, which he'll admit is not the sexiest company in the world for
I
what
think
they
you did it on my
do, but
podcast too. It's
it
like,
certainly is. It certainly is useful,
oh yeah.
especially if you're running a hospital lab or a clinical research organization. That instead of doing a handwritten checklist, you can do all of the um, updating of how functional or how the equipment is performing in the lab, all done electronically instead of by a really inefficient handwritten checklist.
Yeah, I had him on my podcast, and my comparison was like going into a bathroom and seeing the
Yes.
cleaning sheet
Yeah.
on a checklist,
Yeah.
and I guess that's the same thing or similar to what they do in hospitals for checking things. But yeah, that's definitely really cool. Um, I've definitely been to your events and following these companies very closely. I think I remember hearing about OPA um, during maybe the first or second Million Cups when we still had in person events, like way back when. Um, I remember hearing about it uh, at in the CIE in their big conference room,
Right.
and always knowing it would have been pretty beneficial just based on knowing how we're a top city for drug use and all. Not like the best thing in the world, but it's definitely a do good
Right.
business as well. But also they're definitely making
Right.
money, and so
Well, I
that's super
mean,
cool to see.
so he's trying to solve a problem, and our investors in Whale. Again, I'm not an investor; I simply lead the process.
Mm-hmm.
But we are an investor, and so that is a problem for Wilmington. Another problem, I just visited their lab yesterday. It's not a Wilmington company, but it's in Raleigh, Durham, called Nala Systems. So
Mm-hmm.
recently, I guess 2 years ago, they measured the water in a high school or a elementary school, actually, in Brunswick County across the river, and found that they had the worst water in the whole country.
Mm-hmm.
And where that comes from is a plant in Fayetteville, a former DuPont plant, that is putting chemicals in the Cape Fear River. They're called PFAS chemicals. And if you've ever seen the scary movie called Dark Water, um, it, it's a very similar story where these chemicals have a real impact on newborn children. And part of the movie, the child he actually had 2 noses, 4 nostrils on his face, and
Mm.
that was a
Whoa.
direct impact from the chemicals that were in the river. And so this company called Nala Systems has a membrane filter that filters the water at a city level. We're not talking about at your independent, in your house kind of water. We're talking about at
Florida, yeah.
the city level that gives everyone water. And
Mm.
it's a really interesting product.
I really like businesses like that too because I think they can easily create larger documentaries behind them too, and even like True Colors can do that as well. But they have such a strong story that they can literally build behind these bigger documentaries based on
I
water
mean,
systems
True
or
Colors is going to be
yeah.
a 60-minute story within, I would guess, within 18 months, they'll be on 60
Mm-hmm.
minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's definitely great for their marketing and PR side, for sure. But do you think that's definitely what helps businesses these days, and that they have to have uh, a almost like a do good focus behind them, or do
No,
you?
I don't believe that. I mean,
Mhm.
that's, I would say, maybe a third of the companies. I mean, Encino's not a feel good company, right? And
Yeah.
that's the biggest success story in the history of Wilmington.
Mm-hmm.
The largest opening day IPO increase in the last 20 years. Um, that says something on Wall Street, not
Mm-hmm.
just in Wilmington, North Carolina, or North Carolina, or the South. That made international news, and that's certainly good for Wilmington.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really all I got. It's pretty short and sweet. I know there's a ton of business events going on, and so I'm trying to go enjoy some. I think there's a business conference going on right now. I'm trying to go to some of those
Yeah.
seminars and the business expo. I know it's also Med Week too, and so
Well, I
lots of stuff
certainly
going
like
on.
to share with your audience that,
Mm-hmm.
they should be proud of Wilmington. Wilmington was just ranked as one of the top 100 emerging ecosystems in the world.
Mm-hmm.
In the world, not in North Carolina. We're now the third best, according to that same ranking, the third best ecosystem in North Carolina, behind Raleigh and Charlotte, which are both 10 times as big as Wilmington. But to be the third smallest U.S. city on a global ranking in the top, we're actually ranked number 81. Last year we were up 91.
Mm-hmm.
So we actually moved up 10 slots even after the maturation of those three companies, Encino and Player Space and Untapped.
Wow. Yeah, that's definitely really cool to see, and I'm excited to see us even grow in those rankings and go from 81 to 71, and then 61, and then hopefully on and
Yeah, I
on
mean,
and on.
it's all up from here, man. It's again, these last 7 days are really going to change the trajectory of what people think about in Wilmington, what they think about across the state, across the South, in the region, and hopefully the PBS show really puts a spotlight on how hard we've been working over the last 8 years, and
Mhm.
people will stop confusing us with that city in Delaware.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Again, I want to thank you for being on, and also everything that you're doing just for the entrepreneurs in the area, and also just in the state and beyond. I feel like I've definitely brought some ideas to you, and that I'm trying to focus more on the development side from college to young professionals, from people wanting to get into entrepreneurship right out of school. And you've definitely played a cool part in that growing. It's definitely still in the idea stage and me just doing my research stage,
Yep.
but I'm
Can
definitely
you put a link to the event on Thursday to your
yeah.
audience for the premiere, the viewing party of the show? And we're also hosting a panel with the local NPR station WHQR. So we're
Hmm.
going to have 3 out of the 5 entrepreneurs that will be on the show, and
Yeah.
we'll have a panel to discuss their business and how this happened and what they hope to come out of it.
Yeah, I'll definitely put it in the description for the audio platforms and also the description on YouTube as well. I did put your LinkedIn down below, but if you have any other ways that you want people to reach you or any calls to action that you can ask you questions or just comments about Wilmington, do you have any ways that other people can reach you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is the best way.
Okay. Okay. Well, thanks for being on, Jim. I was super excited for this podcast, honestly. But definitely thanks for being on. And make sure to check out, you have your own podcast too, right?
I do. It's called Three Sips of Advice. We had people like Jamie Mottram, who might be a great guest on your podcast.
Hmm.
He's got a show called Breaking Tea. And every time there's a big sports moment in a big city, he prints a T-shirt about that moment, and they sell the hell out of those shirts.
Oh, so like
And
the Red
he
Sox
was
just beat.
just this week, he was in Financial Times, which is a huge independent, or I'm sorry, a huge kind of a business newsletter or newspaper based in London.
Hmm.
And so he got some international exposure for Breaking Tea.
Hmm.
We also had
Awesome.
Scott Kirzner from the Boston Globe on the on my podcast, and man, his viewership was fantastic. He's a great business writer out of Boston.
I definitely have a lot more people on my schedule. I've been doing an iffy job at because I'll schedule people out and then they'll have conflicts, and
Right.
I'm really heavy on, obviously, like, if I really care about my guests, I care for their their schedules as
Sure.
well.
Sure.
But I'm definitely still trying to get. I know Ben Fleming on. I have hopefully next week. Who's used to be the head strength and conditioning coach for UNCW athletics, and now he's pretty high up in clean eats. And I've been trying to do some prospecting on Twitter for some founders, and also on Entra too, for some founders to get them on as well. So I'm trying to get some people I know and people I don't know on. And,
Sure.
I'm definitely trying to do a better job at. An alumni of my high school is actually the COO, CEO, is it CEO? Of Burger King. And so I'm
Wow.
trying to use my connections with my high school to try to get him on. But obviously, he's a super busy guy.
Yes.
So I got to plan it out pretty far in advance. And then I also have an alumni friend who's doing a real estate software down in Puerto Rico. And he's like, can we do it start of next year? I'm like, yeah, let's plan it out then.
Yeah, that's right. I'll fly down and meet you
Yeah.
down there. We'll do the podcast live.
We'll do a podcast on the beach. Yeah.
Right.
Super great for audio. But again, thanks for being on. I'm super excited to see, what our city has to hold in the near future, and then the news that's gonna come out very shortly. And again, thanks for being such a influential and beneficial part of the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Wilmington.
Well, thank you for the opportunity today, and I look forward to seeing you next Thursday then.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim.
Okay. Bye.